What was the most successful prank you've ever pulled? A long time ago, before the age of Windows, I wrote a TSR app that captured the keyboard input before making it to the system. You see, my coworkers and I played jokes on one another, so this was my trump card. Basically, it kept track of all letters upper and lower were separated numbers and symbols. Then it would pick a random time somewhere from 1 day to 1 week. When that time expired, it would randomly pick a key from the list and capture its input and not let it through. The effect is that key, although typed, would not show up in the system. It would then start again, removing a different key. Over time, less and less keys became available. I installed it on my coworker's machine and let it run. First thing to disappear was something like, he noticed but ignored it. Then a character like Q used, but not too often. Third character was one in his name, so he typed his name with that character as uppercase. By now, weeks later, I was really enjoying it. Then something like E disappeared, and he lost it. He was ready to nuke his whole system, so I stopped him, letting him know what it was. I had installed a backdoor, so all I had to do was pass it a parameter, and it would restore the keyboard and remove itself. He took it well, and then wanted to install it on our boss's computer. They were good friends. Back in university, my housemate used to live off tinned food. He would have a massive variety of soups, curries and veggies in his cupboards, but all tinned. I'm talking dozens of tins filling up the whole cupboard. He would be the only one who survived a nuclear bomb. I came up with this idea where I carefully removed the label off a tin of chicken soup and stuck it onto a tin of value cat food I had bought in the supermarket for this purpose. That evening he was about to eat dinner, and of course I was saying, "Oh, what are you having for dinner, Jimmy?" How about some chicken soup?" Somehow I persuaded him, and he didn't smell a rat. He picked a tin of soup and opened it, and it was chicken soup. Oh well, I thought. Another time. 2 weeks pass, and I've sort of forgotten about the tin when he is in the kitchen making dinner, and we hear him saying in an alarmed voice, "Guys, what do you think of this soup? Looks a bit funny to me." At this point I couldn't breathe due to laughing so hard. I've been waiting to tell this story for a decade on Reddit, as it was the highlight of my high school years. I managed to convince my sister's 9th grade science teacher she was an amateur arsonist almost by accident. I had a study hall with Mrat the semester before, and one day as I'm sitting in the class near the back, he wanders by and says, "I have your sister in my class next semester. Anything I should know?" Just trying to make conversation with a student whose younger sibling was newly 9th grade. I don't know where it came from, but I jokingly told him, "Look, whatever you heard, it was completely blown out of proportion. No charges were ever filed, and besides, there haven't been any incidents in a couple of months. And besides some smoke damage, there's been no loss of property. Maybe just don't sit her near the waster paper just to be safe." Just pulling Mr. D's leg basically. I forgot about that exchange until the parent-teacher night the next semester, when my mother came back and asked me what I told my sister's science teacher. Apparently I played the defensive older brother act a little too well, and he spent the first 3 weeks of that semester with my sister under close scrutiny, and he had to ask my mum about the validity of my claims. I only found out this past holiday when I was retelling the story, but my sister inadvertently helped the joke along that first week she was in science. They were lighting Bunsen burners, and Mrad asked if anyone knew how to use matches. Given we grew up with wood heat and camping, it should come as no surprise that my sister's hand shot up. One summer when my cousin was staying with us, he and I had a small prank war going on against one another. We decided to put our talents together and try to prank everyone else. We put small piles of flour on each blade of the ceiling fan in the living room, just enough to not be seen from the ground. A few weeks went by and nothing happened, and we had forgotten about it. And then, the day finally came. My mom had company over. I was in the kitchen, and I heard all kinds of shouting, screaming coming from the living room. My cousin ran up to me grinning and said, "It's happening." The living room looked like it had just snowed inside. Everything was coated in a dusting of flour. My mother was screaming. Her guests were staring in confusion, and the dogs were running around in circles. It was so amazing, until we had to clean it all up. I set up a fake email address for the Narwhal Appreciation Society and sent a coworker an email from the address saying we at the Narwhal Appreciation Society have been informed that you, too, have an affinity for this majestic creature and we wanted to see if you would like to join our society. He responded with thanks for the email, not sure who referred me, but I don't have any interest at joining your society. Good luck. A couple of weeks later, I emailed him again and listed off the membership dues for the society and upcoming events. He responded with once again, please note that I'm not interested. Please take me off your distribution list. A few weeks later, I emailed him a note that his membership dues were in arrears, commenting that the faithful narwhal would most assuredly pay its bills if it used currency. I emailed him roughly 2-3 times per year for 3-4 years. For the first year, when we still worked together, I'd see him open the email, shake his head, and say aloud, not these ducking guys again. But he never attempted to block the email address. He responded to some, becoming increasingly agitated, and ignored others. In one response, he attached pictures of dead narwhals that had been killed by newt hunters and said, "This is what I think of your stupid narwhal. I hate them. I wish them all dead." I eventually stopped and never mentioned to him that it was me, but years later, a few ex-coworkers were out for pints, and one guy said to me, "Whatever happened with that narwhal you were doing?" And my pranked coworker's eyes bugged out of his head. That was you. My late husband was a weather nerd and loved inclement weather. One time I was home alone and a huge storm was imminent. I taped the weather warnings. A few days later it was a beautiful sunny day, not a cloud in the sky. We were watching TV, and as soon as he walked into the kitchen to fetch a beer, I started playing the warnings. It was so funny. He kept running outside to check the sky. I laughed so hard, and so did he, when I fessed up. In my senior year in high school, there were 3 of us who took satellite language courses. 2 of us were taking Japanese, while the 3rd student took a German course that aired after the Japanese one. It was proctored in-house by one of the gym teachers, and because we were generally good and smart kids, he left us to our own devices. This mostly meant that we flirted mercilessly with each other while ignoring the teacher who couldn't hear or see us on the TV. Early on, the young lady who took German mentioned that she liked buying and wearing men's jeans rather than women's, for whatever reason, and also mentioned that she wore a 30 waist. I was a 34 at the time, but every so often, maybe every other week, I would bring up that I could fit in what she wore. She'd say there was no way, but I would mention that I'd have to suck in my gut, and I wouldn't be comfortable, but I could do it for a minute or so, just long enough to prove I was right, which is honestly the most important part. Finally, after a few months of this, she very sternly tells me that she's tired of hearing my baseless claims, and that I should cease making them. This led to me very sadly asking if she was telling me there was no way that I was ever going to get in her pants. The very bright red she turned at realizing that this had been a several month setup for a very stupid joke was worth everything to me. When I was 13, I told my mom my alarm stopped working and asked her to wake me up in the morning. So I stayed up until she went to bed and snuck downstairs. I took a jar of Vaseline and put the Vaseline on my doorknob and went to sleep. The next morning my mom woke me up by screaming, "What the F? Who does something like that?" 1998, I was in 4th grade and got my hands on a universal remote watch. At the time it was super high tech and nobody had heard of such a thing. I would sneakily turn the classroom TV on every 5 minutes. The teacher, who I despised, was convinced that ghosts were in the room. She unplugged it after the 3rd or 4th time. We told our tech illiterate teacher to hold the power cord higher so the energy would flow better. She complied. A successful but unsuccessful one. I saw a friend walking ahead of me, so did the old tap on the shoulder, but run past on the other side maneuver. However, while concentrating on him, I didn't see the park bench, ran into it at full speed, and collapsed behind it. Through the gaps in the seat I could see my friend looking left and right, almost freaking out, wondering who had tapped him in the shoulder. The tears from the pain in my leg kept me from laughing and giving myself away for about 20 seconds. Task failed successfully. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.